This video is on taxes for the IBSL course. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, why does government tax? And so take a minute and pause the video and try to brainstorm some ideas. So pause the video now. These are just a few reasons why government taxes. Number one, to pay for public projects like schools, roads, your neighborhood parks, other things. To pay themselves, they make a salary, so they need to tax us to pay them a salary. To disincentivize certain items. So we call those kind of sin taxes on cigarettes and alcohol, so that they want to try to reduce consumption with higher prices. Social programs would be another one. Government helps fund or funds welfare, Social Security, food stamps, link cards, other kind of social, Medicare, Medigap, those things. And protection, because after all, one of the goals of government, or one of the roles of government, is to provide for the common defense. So they need money in order to build warships and planes and other defense items. So there are really two ways about going about taxing, or placing an excise or indirect tax on a market. We can either institute an ad valorem tax, which would be a percentage tax on the item's price. So for example, a 10% tax on each cookie sold. And so with a percentage tax, 10% on a $1 cookie is 10 cents, but a 10% tax placed on what might be the greatest cookie ever, a $100 cookie, would be a much larger revenue. So we're going to notice that the curve of that tax is going to look a little bit different. And for the specific tax, it's just a certain dollar amount. So example, whether the cookie is a $1 cookie or a $100 cookie, if government would just place like a $1 tax on each cookie sold. So ad valorem is percentage tax, specific is dollar amount. So here we have our market for, let's say, cookies. The market is operating efficiently, we're assuming, and this is our original price at equilibrium, and our quantity equilibrium. Now, as I stated, an ad valorem is a percentage tax, so on the lower priced items, we're going to have a relatively low change in price, but at the higher prices, it's going to be the same percentage but a larger dollar amount. So the way that the supply curve is going to look is it's going to start close to the supply curve down here and then get farther away. So supply plus tax. So we would shift the supply curve to the left because it is a tax, but we would notice that as we move farther away, as price goes up, we're noticing that the supply curve with the tax is going to be greater and greater apart, as the same percentage of a greater price, like $100, is going to be more total dollars than that 1% or 10% tax on the dollar cookie from before. And so here's our new equilibrium price. So price would go up, so I'll put price of the tax. And quantity would go down, so I'll put QT, quantity of the tax. Now with a specific tax, we're just going to place a dollar amount. And so it's going to end up being parallel to the supply curve from before. So supply plus tax. So as ad valorem got farther away, the higher the price, the specific tax is just very simply going to be the same distance. And the vertical distance between the two lines is going to be the value of the tax. So whatever the $1 tax, let's say, the difference between the supply curves are going to be $1. Now we'll have the same effect. Supply goes down, so we shift it to the left. We have our original price equilibrium, original quantity, QE, and then our price after the tax goes up, and our quantity after the tax goes down. Alright, so what I've done here is set up my tax graph. I used a specific tax just to kind of make the lines a little bit easier. So they are supposed to be parallel, the two supply curves. So I started at S1 and I shifted to the left to go to supply plus the tax, which reduces supply to the left. So now what I've marked is the original equilibrium, which for this case we're assuming was efficient. So we're assuming no positive and negative externalities, something we'll talk about later. But the market was efficient, and the government decided, we're going to put a tax on, let's say, books. Okay, there's no positive or negative external effects of reading a book or buying a book or producing a book. So it was efficient before, but the government says, you know what? We need some money, so we're going to tax books. So that's what they did. So we're assuming that without externalities, that this tax is still taking place. So now this is the efficient quantity. This is my allocative efficiency point. So whenever we have an inefficient graph, which now this is with the tax, we have our deadweight loss triangle appear here. The area of this triangle is deadweight loss because we were efficient, now we tax, the government taxes, so now we are no longer efficient. Whenever we're not efficient, there's probably some deadweight loss triangle that exists. So that's that. Now we kind of have these other sections kind of quarantined off. We have, and if you notice, so I put the new equilibrium is this red dot, and I put PB, and that means price that the buyers are going to pay. So they were paying the price at this equilibrium point before, but now equilibrium is higher. So they're paying a higher price in the market because of the tax. Let's say the $1 tax on books. But that is not the same thing as the price that the sellers receive. So the buyers are paying the higher price. The sellers are only receiving this price. So that's what the PS stands for. So this kind of creates this other box here, the difference between, the vertical distance between what the buyers are paying and what the sellers are receiving. That is the price of the tax, that vertical distance between those two. So the price of the tax times the quantity of the tax, so this rectangle, that is tax revenue. So that is how much money the government is making off of this tax on books. Then we can see a little more clearly our two triangles that are going to be consumer and producer surplus. So consumer surplus is the area on the graph. Consumers were willing and able to pay higher but don't have to. So this triangle up here is consumer surplus. And then down below we have this triangle here which represents producer surplus. So again, in a market like books without externalities, the efficient quantity was without the tax. Once the government decides to tax, that becomes the less efficient quantity because society wants this much. They want this quantity. So for now it'll be QSO, quantity that's socially optimal. But the government is restricting that quantity because of the tax and the reduce of supply.